Dear friends, in a world that often feels chaotic and loud, your peace of mind is priceless. Too often, we tolerate words, behaviors, and environments that corrode our inner balance. We endure because we think we must. But let me tell you something very important. Not everything that is faced needs to be accepted. There are certain words, certain phrases, certain mental poisons that you must never tolerate. When people say these things to you, it's not strength to endure, it's wisdom to walk away. Life is too short to entertain disrespect. You must become the guardian of your own mental clarity, spiritual focus, and emotional energy. What you allow is what will continue. Just as a Shaolin monk defends his temple, you must protect your mind from subtle forms of emotional violence. Today, I will share with you 5 phrases that, when spoken to you, are signs not of your weakness, but of their intent. And in those moments, the right response is not argument, not anger, but distance. Because silence is powerful, walking away is not giving up, it is choosing peace over chaos. When someone says, "You'll never be good enough," they are not just offering a casual remark, they are delivering a deeply rooted attack on your self-worth. This phrase is toxic because it carries with it the weight of finality, as if your entire journey, your potential, and your effort are already dismissed before they even begin to bloom. It is not a statement about your abilities, it is a reflection of the speaker's limitations, fears, and insecurities. People who utter such words often project their own sense of inadequacy onto others. They may feel threatened by your growth, uncomfortable with your ambition, or unwilling to confront the fact that someone is capable of more than they ever allowed themselves to be. Instead of admitting their envy or confusion, they disguise it as criticism. But it's not constructive, it's corrosive, and if you're not careful, repeated exposure to such messaging can start to shape your inner dialogue. Over time, hearing this kind of phrase can cause you to question your abilities, doubt your dreams, and shrink your actions. It can make you play small in situations where you were born to lead. It can trap you in cycles of self-doubt, where your identity becomes built not on your potential, but on someone else's pessimism. And the worst part, you may not even realize it's happening, because it often comes from people close to you, friends, family, or partners whose opinions you may naturally trust. But the truth is this: no one has the authority to define your limits except you. Your journey is not a democracy. You are evolving every single day, learning through each failure, building strength through every setback. Greatness is not born out of immediate perfection, it is forged in resilience, effort, and a refusal to quit. This phrase, "You'll never be good enough," is meant to stop you before you even begin. It's a verbal trap, a wall built from someone else's fear, and just because they've accepted a small version of their life doesn't mean you must do the same. You do not have to shrink to fit their comfort zone. You do not need permission to rise. Words can wound, but they can also wake us up. Let this phrase be your trigger not to surrender, but to sharpen your vision, reclaim your focus, and reignite your self-belief. What someone else sees as your weakness is often your greatest strength, misunderstood. When someone tells you you're too sensitive, they are not giving you feedback, they are subtly invalidating your emotional experience. On the surface, it may sound like a harmless observation, but at its core, this phrase is often used as a weapon to silence, dismiss, and gaslight your genuine reactions. It is a way to shift blame away from their own hurtful behavior and place it onto your emotional response. Let's be clear, sensitivity is not weakness, it is not fragility, it is awareness, a heightened perception of emotions, energy, and the subtleties of human interaction. Sensitive people often feel deeply, think thoroughly, and observe silently. They notice things others ignore. They are wired to connect, to empathize, and to respond with care. These are not flaws. These are strengths, profound strengths that are necessary in a world that often moves too fast and feels too cold. When someone calls you too sensitive, what they're often saying is, "I don't want to take responsibility for how my words or actions affect you." Instead of reflecting on their own tone, aggression, or insensitivity, they deflect the issue by labeling your reaction as the problem. In doing so, they create an emotional distortion where the person who is hurt becomes the one who is overreacting, and the person who caused the harm becomes the victim of too much emotion. Over time, this kind of messaging can erode your trust in your own intuition. You may begin to question your instincts, suppress your emotions, or learn to silence yourself to keep the peace. You might even start apologizing for simply feeling. This internal conflict can lead to emotional numbness, anxiety, or a deep sense of loneliness because you feel unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. But sensitivity is a form of intelligence, emotional intelligence. It allows you to connect deeply with others, recognize unspoken needs, and offer compassion where others might only give criticism. It takes courage to feel in a world that often encourages emotional suppression. And it takes strength to remain open-hearted when you've been taught to shut down. Being told that you're too sensitive is not a sign that you should change who you are. Rather, it's a sign that the environment or person you're engaging with may lack the maturity or emotional depth to meet you where you are. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling things deeply. The world needs more people who feel, not fewer. Few phrases are as emotionally manipulative and psychologically damaging as "no one else will want you." It is not simply a hurtful statement, it is a calculated blow to your self-worth designed to isolate you, create fear, and trap you in dependency. This kind of language is most often used by individuals who seek control, not connection, by those who do not wish to uplift you, but to make you doubt your value so that you remain small and within their reach. At its core, this statement feeds on fear, the fear of abandonment, loneliness, and rejection. It's a form of emotional blackmail that aims to convince you that your identity, beauty, and spirit are so flawed or so broken that you should consider yourself lucky to be tolerated at all. It suggests that your worth is conditional and your options are limited, that you should endure mistreatment or neglect because the alternative is worse. This phrase doesn't arise in healthy relationships. It is rooted in control and insecurity. A secure, loving person would never make you feel like you're unlovable without them. They would never use your vulnerabilities against you. But those who say this are often terrified of losing control, so they cage you using words. They build invisible walls around you, whispering threats disguised as advice. You won't find better. No one will put up with you. You're lucky I'm still here. When repeated over time, this narrative can seep into your subconscious and begin to shape your identity. You start to question your worth. You begin to accept crumbs instead of waiting for the feast you deserve. You stop dreaming, stop reaching, stop believing in something healthier because you've been made to believe that there is nothing else out there for you. This is how emotional abuse operates, not with loud punches, but with quiet poison. But here's a truth that must not be forgotten. Your worth is not defined by someone else's ability to see it. Just because someone is blind to your value doesn't mean it isn't there. And just because someone is the loudest voice in the room doesn't mean they are speaking truth. You were not born to beg for love. You were not created to be tolerated. You were meant to be embraced, understood, celebrated. The moment someone tells you that no one else will want you, they are showing you their fear, not your future. They are revealing their own sense of inadequacy and their desperate attempt to make you believe in scarcity, that you are not good enough, not beautiful enough, not strong enough to be loved by someone better. But scarcity is a lie, love is abundant, respect is possible, healing is real. When someone says you always mess things up, they aren't just pointing out a mistake, they're making an attack on your identity. This phrase doesn't speak to a specific action or situation. It targets your entire character. It's a sweeping, absolute judgment that's meant to make you feel like failure is not something you do occasionally, but something you are. And that distinction is dangerous. This kind of language often stems from a place of frustration or control, but the real damage happens when it's repeated often enough that it becomes internalized. What begins as someone else's careless words can quickly become your internal voice. You start to hesitate, overthink, or second guess even the smallest decisions. You begin to feel like you're walking on eggshells, afraid that no matter how hard you try, you'll fall short, not because you're incapable, but because you've been told so many times that it's just who you are. Statements like this are often rooted in patterns of emotional abuse or manipulation. People who frequently use this kind of language are not trying to help you grow, they are trying to gain control by keeping you small. By convincing you that you're inherently flawed, they maintain a psychological advantage. They make themselves the stable one, the fixer, the person you need in order to function, because according to them, you're not capable on your own. This imbalance is not love, it's not guidance, it's oppression in disguise, and what makes this even more painful is that it often comes from people whose opinions we value the most: parents, partners, close friends, mentors. When the people we trust the most say things that attack our identity, it cuts deeper than any insult from a stranger ever could, because we want to believe that they know us, understand us, and see our efforts. But instead, their words become chains reinforcing a version of ourselves that is small, broken, and powerless. The truth is, mistakes are not the opposite of success, they are part of it. Every human being fails, struggles, and makes poor decisions at times. That's how we grow. It's how we learn. To be human is to be imperfect. But there's a world of difference between someone pointing out a specific behavior you could have handled that differently, and someone attacking your entire identity with absolutes like you always mess things up. The former encourages reflection, the latter enforces shame. Over time, being told that you always ruin things creates a mental narrative that's hard to escape. It affects how you show up in relationships, how you perform at work, how you treat yourself in moments of vulnerability. You begin to play small not because you're weak, but because you were convinced that you were never strong to begin with, and slowly, your belief in yourself begins to erode. But here's something to remember. No one gets to define your whole identity based on your lowest moments. Growth is not linear, it's messy, but progress happens every time you choose to try again. And people who truly care about you won't use your past mistakes as weapons. They'll offer support, accountability, and belief in your potential. When someone says, "You owe me," they are not just making a statement, they are attempting to place you in a psychological and emotional debt. This phrase is often used not to remind you of a past favor, but to exert control over your choices, your actions, and even your sense of freedom. On the surface, it may seem like a request for acknowledgement or appreciation, but underneath, it's a transactional mindset disguised as generosity. Let's unpack the hidden layers of this statement. In healthy relationships, whether romantic, familial, professional, or platonic, giving should come from a place of love, compassion, mutual respect, or shared purpose. Genuine acts of kindness are offered freely without the expectation of repayment. They arise from the heart, not from a scorecard. But when someone keeps reminding you of what they've done for you, when every act of help is followed by a demand or guilt trip, It's not a gift anymore. It becomes a tool of leverage. You owe me becomes a leash, a subtle chain that binds you in guilt. It suggests that your autonomy is no longer yours, that your choices must now be filtered through what someone else thinks you should do in order to balance a debt. It can start small, a favor here, a sacrifice there, but over time, this mindset can condition you to believe that your worth is directly tied to what you owe others, rather than who you truly are. What makes this phrase especially dangerous is that it often follows a moment of vulnerability. Maybe someone helped you when you were struggling financially, emotionally, or during a personal crisis. And because you're grateful, you want to reciprocate or honor that support. But then the dynamic begins to shift. Suddenly, your gratitude is no longer enough. You're expected to comply. You're expected to stay. You're expected to agree, even when it goes against your values or needs, because, after all, you owe them. This kind of emotional debt creates imbalance. You may start feeling guilty for having boundaries. You may hesitate to say no, even when something doesn't sit right with you. You might stay in unhealthy relationships, accept unfair treatment, or overextend yourself, just to avoid the guilt of being called ungrateful. But here's the truth: being helped does not mean you lose your right to make independent choices. People who repeatedly say "you owe me" often operate from a mindset of control, not connection. They see relationships as exchanges, not bonds of trust, but contracts with fine print. And this keeps you locked in a state of emotional submission, where your freedom is always under negotiation. The danger lies in how normalized this can become, especially in family structures, cultural settings, or long-term relationships where duty and obligation are emphasized over emotional balance. Over time, it can condition you to betray your own needs just to maintain the illusion of loyalty. But loyalty without freedom is not loyalty, it's captivity. Few phrases are as emotionally suffocating and psychologically manipulative as the words, "You're nothing without me." At first glance, it might seem like a dramatic statement. But in truth, this is a deeply toxic assertion, one that aims to crush your independence, diminish your identity, and make you question your value outside of someone else's shadow. This is not a declaration of love or loyalty, it is a declaration of control. When someone says, "You're nothing without me," they are trying to position themselves as the source of your worth, your success, your happiness, or your survival. It is a way of rewriting your story, turning them into the hero, and turning you into a dependent. This phrase doesn't celebrate your journey, it erases it. It suggests that you bring nothing of value to the table, that you exist because of their presence, their resources, their influence, or their so-called generosity. People who use this phrase often feel threatened by your growth. They may have once held power in your life, maybe they were your emotional anchor, financial support, or a source of mentorship. But instead of encouraging your evolution, they become fearful that your rising independence means a loss of their importance. So, they weaponize this phrase to maintain emotional dominance. By convincing you that you cannot survive without them, they aim to keep you within their orbit, trapped in gratitude, guilt, or fear. What makes this especially damaging is that it attacks your sense of self. It undermines your accomplishments, your resilience, and your ability to thrive on your own. Even if you've worked hard, made sacrifices, and grown through your own effort, hearing "you're nothing without me" can plant a seed of self-doubt. Over time, you may begin to believe that your worth is borrowed, not built, that it hinges on another person's presence rather than your own inner strength. This kind of messaging is especially common in toxic relationships, whether romantic, professional, or even parental. It's used to manipulate and control, to make you second guess any move that might lead you away from them. You might begin to feel guilty for wanting freedom, hesitant to pursue your dreams, or fearful of making independent choices. It creates a mental cage where even the idea of separation feels like failure or betrayal. But here's the deeper truth: no one owns your identity. Your worth is not something that another person grants you, it is something you carry within. The idea that you are nothing without someone else is not only false, it's a projection of their fear of losing relevance, control, or the illusion of superiority. This phrase is meant to keep you small. It's designed to paralyze you emotionally, so that your courage to walk away is swallowed by uncertainty. It is a phrase that thrives on repetition. The more it's said, the more it echoes in your thoughts, especially in moments of weakness. And that's exactly what the speaker wants for you to be: uncertain, dependent, unsure, because when you don't know who you are, it's easier for them to define you, but your value is not negotiable. Your essence, your strength, and your dreams exist beyond anyone's approval or permission. You are not someone's creation, you are your own. The phrase "you're overthinking it" is often used casually, but when repeated in the wrong context, it can become a subtle and persistent way of silencing deep thought, emotional insight, and intuition. On the surface, it might sound like advice, a call to relax, to stop worrying, or to simplify. But when used dismissively, especially during serious conversations or moments of vulnerability, it serves to shut down your perspective and undermine your intelligence. Let's be clear, there is a difference between rumination and critical thinking. There's a difference between paralysis by analysis and having the ability to look beneath the surface, to examine nuance, or to assess situations carefully. People who label you as overthinking often do so not because you're thinking too much, but because your thoughts are making them uncomfortable. They don't want to deal with the complexity you're seeing. They don't want to be held accountable for actions that don't hold up under scrutiny. This phrase is especially dangerous when it becomes a habitual response to your questions, instincts, or emotional insights. Imagine raising a concern about someone's behavior, a tone, a pattern, a feeling, and being immediately told, "You're overthinking it." That doesn't just dismiss the concern, it sends a deeper message: your perception is wrong. Your judgment is flawed. Your emotional radar is broken. Over time, hearing this can lead you to doubt yourself, not just in relationships, but in every area of life. You begin to mistrust your own inner compass. And that self-doubt can be debilitating. You may stay in situations that feel wrong just because someone told you they're fine. You might ignore red flags in friendships, workplaces, or partnerships because you've been conditioned to believe that your gut is exaggerating. You may begin to silence your voice not because you don't care, but because you've learned that speaking up will be met with minimization. The deeper problem is that "you're overthinking it" is rarely a conversation starter. It's a conversation ender. It's a subtle power move that tells you, "This topic is not worth exploring. Your analysis isn't welcome. Let's not go deeper." And that's where emotional shallowness begins to take over, when we are taught that depth is a problem, that feeling too much or thinking too much is a flaw. But the truth is, overthinking is often just deep thinking misnamed. Sensitive, intuitive, and reflective people are often mislabeled as overthinkers because they see connections others miss. They notice the hidden meanings, the subtle inconsistencies, the emotional currents under people's words. These are not weaknesses, they are the very traits that lead to wisdom, empathy, and self-awareness. When someone says "you're overthinking it," especially in a way that repeatedly makes you question your insight, they may not be protecting your peace, they may be protecting their own comfort zone. They may not want you to follow that thread, to ask that question, or to shine that light into the dark corner. Because once you do, truth emerges, and not everyone is ready for that. There comes a point in every person's life when silence becomes strength, distance becomes clarity, and walking away becomes the most powerful thing you can do. When people use words to manipulate, diminish, or control you, when they say things like "you always mess up," "you owe me," "you're nothing without me," or "no one else will want you," they aren't just hurting you. They're trying to redefine you, but you are not defined by someone's limited view of your worth. You are not here to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. You are not here to stay in places that break your spirit just to prove your loyalty. You are here to grow, to rise, and to protect your peace, even if that means letting go of people who once mattered. Even if it means walking away from relationships, roles, or environments that no longer reflect your truth. The greatest act of self-love is not staying in pain, it's choosing freedom. So, walk away not in anger, but in strength. Walk away not to prove a point, but to preserve your soul. And never forget, you are enough just as you are. You never needed permission to honor your worth.